When God chose to take on our flesh and dwell in our world, he could have just assumed an adult human body and entered that and then walked out of the desert into Galilee and begun his preaching and his ministry, and it would have worked. But he didn't choose that. Instead, he chose to enter the world just as you and I do, to be born of a mother, a virgin mother, of course, because God the Father is his father, but to be born of a mother and enter our world as an infant and be raised by human parents. And that thought alone is kind of awesome. God himself, the creator of all things, made himself an infant, totally dependent upon the care of two young people, probably just two teenagers, at the time when Mary had Jesus. The normal betrothal age for a girl in Jesus' day was 13. A 16-year-old girl who was not married was considered an old maid. And the normal betrothal age for a young man was 18. So probably just two teenagers. And God himself put himself at the care of the two of them, dependent completely on two people that he himself had created. Totally awesome. Not only were they responsible for him, but as we hear in the gospel reading, that they became the model for family life. And so today, on the Feast of the Holy Family, we always look at our own families and see what we can do to be able to make our families like theirs. So Paul VI, in a homily he gave in Nazareth, once talked about the school of the family of Nazareth and how we'd love to be able to return to his childhood and learn at the feet of Mary and Joseph. And Jesus, in submitting himself to the Blessed Mother and Saint Joseph, blessed the family and made it the model and the perfect place for us to learn all of the values of life, everything that is important that we learn in a family. And so the family is the greatest school of all. And each member of the family, of course, needs to respect his own role and carry it out to the best of his ability. First, I think in our gospel reading today, it's important to notice that Jesus, when Mary and Joseph basically told him, he was in his father's house wanting to go about his ministry, basically saying, it's not time yet. You're only 12 years old. There will be time for you to go out and do your ministry, but not now. And he came back with them and was obedient to them. So that's the first message for children in a family. Be obedient to your parents. You got that, guys? What do you mean, no? Be obedient to your parents. I'm watching you, kiddo. First of all, children, as Jesus was obedient to Mary and Joseph, you are obedient to them. If you must disagree with them once in a while, always respectfully. And parents, I always love to tell couples who come in, especially when they're having their first child baptized, that I say, you are the most important teachers your children are ever going to have. All the people they meet throughout their lives combined are not going to teach them as much as they are going to learn from the two of you. You are their most important teachers, and you need to be their best of teachers. And that means each and every day trying to make sure that you as parents are caring for your children and for each other the way Mary and Joseph cared for each other and for Jesus. And you don't need me to tell you about all of the dangers and difficulties and the struggles and conflicts there are out there and all the things that often stand in the way of you teaching your children. You know that there are many things in society that completely contradict every value you hold and want to share with them, and we can be so worried about the effects of it. Well, one of the best things we can do is just make sure we've raised our children well in our values and our beliefs so that when they encounter these other opinions out there, they will right away say, well, no, that's wrong. I know it's wrong because my parents taught me that God says this is wrong. And that's the best thing we can do to make sure that our children are able to resist all the temptations to turn the gospel aside and follow the many different voices in the world that would call them to espouse so many things other than Christ. And while there are many different things that we could talk about, there's one in particular that I have always firmly felt that I've lamented as one of the biggest obstacles to children learning the faith from their parents and being able to, and one of the biggest damages to family life in our society today, which is something I was happy to hear Pope Benedict XVI also repeat the same thing, and that was the loss of Sunday as a day of rest. The third commandment, of course, reminds us, remember the Lord's Day to keep it holy. And as Catholics, that means two things. Number one, we worship God. We come to church every Sunday unless there's an emergency or something truly that would prevent us from being here. And not just a busy schedule, but something that would make it impossible for us to be here and not merely difficult. And why do we worship the Lord every Sunday? Because we owe it to Him. It is our duty before God. I think that's a concept that is completely lost in our world today. Many people who just say, I don't believe what the church teaches, so I'm not going back to church, as if they're somehow spiting the church. Well, they're only spiting themselves. They're not giving God the worship that is His due, that we owe Him. And they're not allowing God to form them and to nourish them and nurture them. So they're not hurting their parish and they're not hurting God. They're hurting themselves by not coming to church on Sunday. So first, we worship God, unless it's physically impossible. And secondly, we observe it as a day of rest. As the Lord commanded in the third commandment, 6 days you may work, and then the seventh day is sacred to the Lord. For our Jewish brothers and sisters, that would be Saturday, because the Sabbath day in the Jewish calendar, of course, was Saturday. And they rested on the day that God rested from His creation of the world. For us as Christians, now with the resurrection of Christ, as St. Paul says, the old order has passed away and all is new. We're no longer observing the Lord's day of rest from when He rested from creation as the day sacred to the Lord, but the day when the Lord restored creation by rising from the dead. So we celebrate Sunday, the first day of the week, as the Lord's Day, because we remember that God has saved us from sin and death by suffering, dying, and rising from the dead. And that's why we make Sunday our holy day. And then spend the rest of the time resting, relaxing from the work we do the other 6 days of the week, just taking some time out, just relax, spending time with the children, with one another, and forgetting all the chores and all the other things that we do, and just remembering why we do the things we do the other 6 days of the week. We work hard for 6 days, but one day we break from our labors and remember God and our family, that we are here, first of all, to worship God and follow His law into heaven, and secondly, to raise our children, and as a family to help us learn the values of God so we can enter His kingdom. Unfortunately, that has been so lost today, and sadly, there are so many people who tell me, well, Father, I just can't rest on Sunday, I'm too busy. Well, if that happens, then I think that's a big red flag if we say that. Let's look back, first of all, at why God commanded that the people rest on the seventh day. Remember, they had just left slavery in Egypt. He brought them through the Red Sea, destroyed Pharaoh's army. They were drowned in the Red Sea. On one side, they were slaves. On the other side now, they were a free people, a nation, the people of God. And immediately after crossing the Red Sea, He brought them to Mount Sinai and gave them the 10 suggestions. Oh, I'm sorry, not the 10 suggestions? I do this with the 5th grade whenever I'm teaching them. I say that then God gave them the 10 suggestions. And they go, no. Oh, the 10 recommendations. No. Oh, the 10 helpful hints? The 10 good ideas? The 10 guidelines? And they all go, no. I said, the 10 what? Commandments. I said, what? The 10 what? And they yell out, commandments. The 10 what? Commandments. Until they're yelling it out the windows of the school. And I say, do we have any option as to whether or not we want to follow a commandment? And they say, no. I said, if your mother and father give you a commandment and you don't follow it, what happens to you? And they say, we get in trouble. I said, right, you get in trouble. Well, the same thing with God, not because He's going to punish us, but He knows this world will not work. We can't make it work if we do not obey these commandments He gives us. If we throw them out the window, we'll have anarchy. And so He gives us the commandments. And the third commandment, to rest on the Lord's day, He gave it to them literally because they could. A slave cannot take a day of rest. They had to work every day. So the Lord said, you work hard for 6 days, and then the 7th day you rest. You worship me and you rest to show that your work serves you. You are not serving your work. And When I was a boy, that wasn't a problem. There were very few things that kept us from resting on Sunday. Stores were not open, only a few little things. If the bakery, if you wanted to go get some donuts after Mass and bring them home and eat them, you could do that. Maybe the deli to get some antipasta or something like that. But only places that sold absolute necessities. But then the malls and all the other stores started opening, and people learned to shop on Sunday. And now Sunday has become the biggest shopping day of the week. Do you realize that? The day that's supposed to be the day of rest is now the biggest shopping day of the week. And then sports programs started happening on Sunday mornings. They never happened when I was a kid. There was nothing happening on Sunday, so there was nothing that prevented you from coming to Mass and then spending time with your family. And then we always had Sunday dinner together. When I was a little boy, we always went to my grandmother's, still in the Bronx. We drove down there. And when we got older, that was no longer possible, and my grandparents were elderly. But we still spent Sunday dinner together as a family. And we honored that. But now today there's sports programs and people are having parties and people are shopping and doing all sorts of things, and they're running in every other direction, and somehow we find ourselves having to cram Mass into our busy Sunday schedule and finding a place for it. And sadly, many people don't even bother to do that. They go to Mass when they have the time for it. And many people who have no problem coming to Mass, they'll come every once in a while, and but they said, well, we were just so busy that day. This kid had a tournament, that kid had that. We were going here, we were doing this. We just couldn't fit Mass in. And isn't that terrible? What we've done there is decided all these other things are more important than worshiping God. Sometimes I'll see kids, altar servers who miss their Mass. I don't mean you guys here. I'm not picking on you. But sometimes I'll see an altar server who didn't make Mass. I said, what happened? Oh, well, I had a game. We couldn't go. Well, what time was your game? 12 noon. I said, well, we have Mass Saturday night. We have Mass Sunday morning at 8 and 10. Couldn't you have come to one of those Masses? But I'm sure in the mind of the parents, it was inconvenient to do that. In one parish where I was, from the minute school opened in September until Thanksgiving, we saw almost none of our children. And we knew exactly why. They were all involved in a very popular football program in the town. And once Thanksgiving came and the program was over, we saw all our kids again at Mass. And one mother even bragged to me. She goes, now that football's over, we can bring the kids back to Mass. It's like, and what did you just teach your children there? That football is a higher priority than God. Is that the message you want to give your children? That we worship God when it's convenient, when we don't have anything else going on? No, maybe we have to sacrifice other plans and come Saturday night, or get up early and go to the 8 a.m. Mass if we know we have to be somewhere by 12 noon. But always to make sure that God is worshiped first and foremost before anything else we do. That is our first obligation of the Lord's Day, is to worship God. And the second is spending it with our family and resting. And just shuffling kids from football games to dance practices to parties and things, that's not, to borrow the cliche, quality time, spending the good time with our children, not just having them in the backseat of the car, but spending time with them at home. For example, Christmas, they all got different toys and games. Maybe today spend time with them. Sit down and play the games with them. Make that quality time for your children, which in this day and age they need so much. They need the presence of their parents more than anything. And of course, some people said to me, well, Father, that sounds nice, but you just don't know what our lives are like. They're just too busy. We can't rest on Sunday. It is a sad commentary on our world that the church has to command people to rest, and we say, I'm too busy to rest. Well, if that's the case, then what's happened? Then we've become slaves again. We cannot rest because we must work. That's the sign of a slave, not of a free person. So if you find yourself saying, I can't rest on Sunday, I have to get yard work done, I have to get things from the office home, that's the only time I can get it done, well, then let that be a big red sign that we've put the cart before the horse, that the Lord's Day is about worshiping God and our children. And if we're too busy to rest on Sunday, then we're simply too busy, and something has to give. But it cannot be God, and it cannot be our families. But doing everything we can to observe the Lord's Day as a day of rest. I remember when I was a boy, one of my neighbors once was observed mowing his lawn on Sunday. And I remember during the week the scuttlebutt of all the parents, the other adults in the neighborhood saying, "Did you see that? He was out mowing his lawn on a Sunday? Does he have no respect for God? What's wrong with him? Is he a pagan?" Oh, they were absolutely horrified. Now when we tell people not to do chores, yard work, and all that on Sunday, we're religious fanatics. What's happened in 50 years that we went from that man is disrespectful to God, and now we're religious fanatics? What has gone on in our lives? Have we made our duties and our work and our all sorts of other things take priority over worshiping God and spending time with our families? My friends, I encourage you, I urge you, I plead with you, do everything you can as a family to recover Sunday as a day of rest. Only doing unnecessary labor. Necessary things, obviously, we have to cook meals, police have to work, all sorts of different things. Yeah, there are some jobs that must be done on Sunday. But if it can be left till Monday, including shopping, leave it till Monday. And if we know Sunday we have something happening, see if we can do it on Friday night or Saturday. Even kids, I tell them their homework. If you can get it done on Friday and Saturday, this way it's done, and you rest on Sunday and have a little more time for your video games because your homework is done, then do that. And only doing it if it's necessary labor. Like when I tell kids, I said, if you have not studied for a test or done your homework for Monday morning, now it's necessary labor. Now you have to do it. But my friends, it is urgent that we do everything we can in our power to make sure that we observe Sunday as a day of rest. That number one, our worship of God is made before the first decision we make every weekend with everything else we're doing, even if we know I have to be here at this time and there or that, what Mass are we going to? And make that the most important decision, and not skipping Mass because we're too busy. But then secondly, making sure we spend time with our family. That is one of the most important things you, especially parents who are still raising your children, can do for them. Make sure we spend time with our families to make them holy, and remember to recover the day of rest so that we remind ourselves we're not slaves to our work. We're not working because we're forced to. We're working because we do it out of love for God and our families. And that the most important thing in our lives is number one, God, and number two, our family. And if we can do that, then we will have learned well the lessons that Jesus learned at the feet of Mary and Joseph as he was raised in the Holy Family. May Jesus Christ be praised, now and forever.